Welcome to Living Yoga. My name is Darren Main, and in this podcast and interview series, I talk to people who are smarter than me, people who help me navigate this world and find answers to questions that I have, and perhaps you have too. And this topic today, and my guest today, is particularly important to me because I have a 13-year-old son. His name is Chris Balme, and he wrote The Magic in Middle School. It's a fantastic book. I'm really loving it. I think it's going to take the place of the Bhagavad Gita on my nightstand.
Wow.
And high praise, Chris.
Truly.
And he is also the director or founder of the Millennium Middle School in San Francisco, which is sort of an alternative private middle school with a really beautiful philosophy on a time in life that I think many of us as adults look back and don't smile about. So he's going to be talking to us about all things middle school, maybe reframing our own middle school narrative, as well as if you happen to have a middle schooler, a tween or 13-year-old in your life, how you can help them navigate it as well without prematurely aging yourself. A few things before we begin. I will put links to Chris's website and his book in the show notes. I will also put links to my website and my coaching work and yoga classes and all of that stuff in the show notes as well. Feel free to reach out to either or both of us. And if you have a comment or a question about this, you can drop it in the comments and we will keep an eye on that and do our best to respond whenever we can. Chris, welcome. I'm so honored to be chatting with you.
Thank you so much, Darren. And please don't displace the Bhagavad Gita from your bookshelf. But I'm really honored to be here. And I think there are many like you and me too who have kids this age and really want to understand what's going on.
Well, you know, the truth is, before we dive into this, I always say when I give yoga philosophy talks, if you think you're enlightened or even close to enlightened, become a parent or go visit your parents, because both will show you just what a dumpster fire you really are. and that for me is true. I've studied the Bhagavad Gita and meditated, done yoga. I'm like the picture of equanimity. And then my 13-year-old son can push my buttons and I go tumbling over the abyss into madness. And so in many ways, your book, like the Bhagavad Gita and the rest of life, has helped me to come back from the abyss and even learn something about myself in the process. So
thank you.
You're there at least until he goes to high school.
There's a wonderful quote that I'll paraphrase from Jack Kornfield where he said, once you have children, you don't need to go on retreats anymore. You have a Zen trainer living with you, whipping you into shape 24 hours a day. And that's been my experience for sure.
One of those strict Zen teachers that hits you with a stick on occasion.
Exactly that kind. Yeah, wakes you up in the middle of the night.
Well, let's talk a little bit about you first, and then we'll talk about the content of your book, which is amazing. If you have kids, thinking about having kids, or just want to reframe your own middle school experience, which may have been challenging, but probably had some really beautiful, exciting parts to it. We'll get to that in a moment, but you are the founder, and are you still the director of Millennium?
Not anymore. So I was there for 7 years, co-founded it, got to run it and build it. And really with this idea that middle school does not have to suck. And it might actually be a beautiful time. And we wanted to try to, put our time where that idea was and see if we could make it real. And I can tell you all kinds of things, but it proved to me that this time does not have to be one where you lose your sense of self or you get swept away, and addiction to social media. That's not inherently what this is all about.
Yeah. Well, just briefly, because I think Millennium is a really amazing school and teaching model. Can you say how it might be different than, say, your average public middle school? Like, what are you doing different that you feel at least is better for these kids at this formative time versus, the average middle school experience?
I think, unfortunately, the average middle school experience is working directly against what middle schoolers want and need to do. They most of all want to be social and figure out how to be around their peers. And a traditional middle school says, just study by yourself. It's called cheating if you're working together. It's kind of broadcast style, someone at the front of the room. Those are not ways that are going to bring out their drive or connect it to learning. And it's not going to teach them what they're most able to learn at that age, which is to figure out how to be a human around other humans. And that's really what it's about. So with Millennium School, I think the two things that work best there are, one, focusing on belonging first. Make this a safe social space so you can experiment and figure out who you are and be the weird theater kid, this week, and be the super athlete next week, and let that all just be experiments that help you figure out your authentic identity. And two, that it's based around projects instead of classes. And,
I think, and I don't think I'm alone in saying this. I think that one of the things that used to annoy me in middle school and high school was when adults would say, "What are you going to do? What do you want to be when you grow up? What's your career plan?" And it's like, I think back to 13-year-old me, it looks nothing like even 20-year-old me, and the assumption that we know or that we have it figured out. And I think as a parent, I can be like, "Why don't you get this?" And then I'm like, he's just experimenting, and that's what he should be doing. As frustrating as it is for me that wants everything buttoned down.
Of course.
One of the things that you highlight, not in too geeky a way, in a very accessible way, is the idea that like a middle school age person, and then their brain in particular, is at a very unique stage, and that it's capable of very unique things. And when we lean into that, that's good. And when we try to drive against that, it can be pretty unpleasant for everyone, the kids and the adults. I'm wondering if you could just talk a little bit about what that stage of our development is. And it's probably different for boys and girls, with estrogen and testosterone being in there in the mix. But I'm wondering if you could speak to that a little bit.
Absolutely. I mean, I think one of the most important things to understand is that there are two peak times of brain development in our whole lifespan, and that's early childhood and early adolescence, aka middle school. And those are probably the two hardest times to be a parent to someone. Those of us, can remember the toddler years, and if we didn't have a sense of what was going on developmentally or what this was building toward, it would seem like our kids were crazy. we would be crazy as well. And it's the same with middle school, that if we see it developmentally, we get that what's happening is their social brain has just turned on. And most of the sensing that you and I have as adults is available to them, but not the interpretation. So they don't know how to process all that information, but they're picking up hierarchy, grouping, inclusion, exclusion, subtle ways that we show what we're really feeling, even when it's not what we're saying. All of that radar is working now, and it causes them to have to rebuild their whole sense of identity, figure out who is it safe to be, who am I really, how do I connect with people around me, how do I feel like I've contributed something. Those are really their core needs.
Since I suspect, again, I'll speak for me, but I don't think I'm alone in saying this, I don't feel like I got a lot of support in that process in my middle school experience. It wasn't like my parents or the teachers and other adults were malicious. They weren't being abusive. I don't think they understood what you just said. And so it was sort of like a trial and error, hope for the best, flip a coin. Sometimes it worked, but most of the time I just felt awkward and miserable and isolating, and like I was wearing my shoes on the wrong feet or something. How, both as an educator, but then as parents, how do you, if you haven't been through that yourself, if no one really showed you how to do middle school successfully, and what can we do to help with that? Because it just sounds like utter chaos without some scaffolding to get you through it.
Yeah, there are so many things to say to that. One is to understand your child developmentally. And what I mean by that is that at all times, even when they seem like they are being so difficult or so resistant, at all times they're trying to meet their honest developmental needs, and those needs are positive. Sometimes, the route from I want to belong or I want to connect to peers to saying something like, just go away or drop me off 2 blocks away so my friends can't see you. That it's a little hard to trace that route back and realize it's a positive need that maybe in moments like that doesn't get expressed in a graceful way, but that they are always trying to meet those core needs to belong, to connect, to contribute. And one thing also as a general, I think, just helpful point for all of us as parents, particularly when we feel our own adolescent years were icky or even traumatic, is to let ourselves be weird, to be messy, to show kids that we're trying to take care of ourselves. We're not trying to keep the mask on, that we have all of our stuff together. No one does. There are no normal people. And for middle schoolers to realize that just takes this massive pressure off. I don't have to figure out how to be normal, because really normal just means fake. I have to figure out how to be me.
Yeah. That seems to be a moving target in these years. I mean, like, your body is changing. Like, if you walk into a middle school, you've got kids that haven't started puberty yet, and kids that look like young men and young women, and everything in between. And sometimes from the beginning of the school year to the end of the school year, it's like you have two totally different bodies, and desires for, like, when you talk about socializing, like sex and dating and that type of socializing becomes a thing, which is hard enough for adults. How do you how do you help them to navigate that, especially when the last thing they want to talk about is like their changing body, their sexuality, the fact that they have a crush on somebody? All of this is like, yeah, I'm talking to you. No.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the key thing is to make sure they have a space to have those conversations, but it doesn't have to be you. And I think as parents, we really have to watch ourselves carefully here, because we can take it so personally. We see this happening, and maybe, we're eager to participate and open up the conversation, and we're trying to be as open as we can. That may not matter at all. You may just be the wrong person to have that conversation. But you're the right person to make sure that somewhere in their life, there's a safe space, so that it's not just, asking Google or ChatGPT what to do, or, only peer-to-peer. Yeah. What could go wrong? I think an ideal is that they have a peer group that's facilitated in some way. So great middle schools almost always have advisory programs at the heart. Not everybody has access to that, but it could be, summer camps. It could be, faith-based groups or scout groups.
Can you say what an advisory program is generally? So whether it's at somebody's school already, they know it and it's yay, or if it's not at their school, how they might encourage that to be formed, or find outside things like a summer camp or some other substitute for it. Can you just say generally what that is?
So, what advisory, most middle schools in the US have advisory. Unfortunately, a lot of the time it's just like homework time, administrative announcements, nothing much happening. But at the schools that practice it well, it's a stable group of kids, 10, 15 maybe, with one teacher or administrator. And that person is facilitating it to be a safe space to talk about whatever you want to bring up. It might be, I'm having a conflict, with my sibling. I can't stand them. What do I do? Or I'm stressed about homework, or just to celebrate and just have a group that goes through this adventure together. When they have that, it becomes their place of belonging at school. It connects them more to school, and it lets them learn social emotional tools without feeling like they're being lectured about them, because it's in response to an actual in the moment need.
One of the things that you talk about is the third thing, which I think is brilliant. It's such a simple thing, but it's a brilliant thing. And I have found it to be very, very helpful with my son. Maybe you could say what that is, and then we can talk a bit more about it.
Yeah, thanks for raising that. I love it too with my own kids. So the context is, middle schoolers, there's fascinating research that they get really good at reading faces. And you can really see this uptick, in their skills as they hit puberty of accurately picking up what people are feeling. But it also means they're spending a lot of time trying to guess and understand what are you non-verbally communicating. So face-to-face conversation for them is often it's a high load. It's taking a lot of their energy to figure out, is he judging me? Does he think that I'm being stupid? What's really going on? So often being side by side is just a much better way to have an honest conversation. And then the third thing is the idea that we're side by side and we're both looking at this third thing that we can comment on together. And that could be anything from, we're both watching a show and we're just talking out our thoughts about what's happening to, we're doing a project together, we're driving together and noticing what's happening on the street around us. It's often an easier, just a meeting place where you can talk more openly, and they might surprise themselves by how honest they'll be.
Yeah. I have definitely noticed that with my son. Like we'll watch, because we're watching more and more mature content together. And my feeling is he's going to be looking at this stuff, whether it's online or at a friend's house. Might as well watch it with me. And then if he has a question, at least I'm there to frame it for him. But I've noticed like when there's like a steamy sex scene or romantic scene, or even just something like a man is commenting to a woman in a really misogynistic way, which is, I'm realizing everywhere in movies and TV, to be able to just comment like, I don't like the way he's talking to her, that as opposed to this sit down and let's have a father-son conversation, which is just painful for everyone and probably doesn't achieve anything.
It's so much more open this way. Like he doesn't have to say something back to you in the moment. You're not staring at him, waiting for his response. You're just both having this experience together. Yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah. If you had one piece of advice I actually will take this on two tracks. It might be the same piece of advice. If you had one piece of advice for parents, and then the same thing for educators or anybody who works with middle school age kids, what would it be? Like, what thing do you think is like the main takeaway?
First and foremost, be weird. Lean into the messiness of this age. It's not supposed to be clean cut and simple. They are like identity experimenters. They're going to change who they are minute by minute, day by day. And if we're honest, we're still changing a lot. We're probably still questioning our identity, or at minimum, we can remember that we were intensively at some point earlier. So like you were saying at the beginning, avoiding those long-term, what do you want to be when you grow up question, that's really not the point of this age. It's more like, who are you today? Or what was your experience of that social scene like? And being honest that we're still having those moments. I had a conflict with a friend. Here's what I'm struggling with right now. We can be a bit messy together, and that's a gift to them, I think.
Do you have any thoughts? I mean, some of this is like just middle school we're humans and we go through puberty, and like our brains are at a certain stage of development, and that's been true for millions of years, thousands of years. I don't know how long, a long time. And I know every generation says this, your generation has it so much harder than mine, or things were simpler when I was young. But for kids today, with social media, with the internet, with access to virtually everything you don't want your kid to see and do in their bedroom on their computer with a few clicks of a button, and they're probably better at finding it than you are. Do you have any thoughts about like how, I mean, I see different types of parents, and some are just like, I just shut them down and they never have access to the internet, or they try and sort of sanitize everything. And then there's others are just like, they're going to find it. Just let them spend their time on Pornhub or whatever. And then there's like somewhere in between. And I haven't found the sweet spot yet. I'm wondering if you have any advice for like modern parenting with all the new challenges that we didn't get any kind of training in because it didn't exist.
Yeah. Well, we need at least 5 hours for this question. There's so much here. But I think the first thing I'd say, actually, even before talking about managing their tech use, is there's research showing that the kids who struggle the most online are ones who are also struggling with their in real life relationships. The ones who are getting lost in, seeking likes above everything else or getting addicted. And similarly, the kids who get lost in video games are often the ones who don't have any outlets for competition in real life. But the research shows that if you focus on their quality of real life relationships, it's a protective factor against getting lost online. It's not a cure-all, but I think that's the place to start. The kids who have good peer relationships where they feel safe, they belong, are going to be safer online fundamentally.
Yeah. That's really helpful. What, just briefly, what does, because I think there are parents who are really super strict, and we don't have a screen in our house, and yay for them. I don't know how they do it.
Yeah.
I'm not one of them.
Neither am I.
What does the research suggest about this? Are we totally messing up our kids by having a screen, or is there actually some benefit to? The ability to Google stuff and to do your own research, to start to form your own opinions, is not inherently bad. We all do it as adults.
I agree. Yeah, I get pretty wary of people trying to pin all of our social problems on technology. There's clearly been an increase in teen mental health problems, for example, and some people really attribute that to the rise of phone use. But there are other factors that there's just an intriguing study a few weeks ago pointing to decrease in child independence as potentially a bigger factor than technology use in having more mental health problems among teens. So I don't think tech is all bad. As with anything, it's another place where humans do human stuff. And we've just got to understand the nuances of it. The addictive properties mean, that's something that kids need to be prepared for. I think monitoring is wise, but I don't think avoiding it is necessary.
Yeah. Thank you. I feel like less of a crappy parent now.
Good.
Before we wrap, do you have anything else you think that people need to know? Aside from buy your book, which every parent and educator should do. And honestly, this is my advice, and then you can give yours. You should get this book before your kid is in middle school. Forewarned is forearmed, right?
Yes.
If you know what's coming, it's not so shocking when they say, drop me off 2 blocks away or whatever.
Yeah, you can even prepare them for it. Like my wife tells the story that her father sat her down when she was maybe in 4th grade and said, in a couple of years, you're probably going to start thinking that we're just really stupid. And we just want you to know, that's a normal phase. And at the time she was like, oh, I would never think that. And then 2 years passed and she thought exactly that. But she tells the story now that, she couldn't totally write them off because they weren't that stupid if they had warned her that this phase was coming. Yeah. So just as an example of forewarned is forearmed. And the other thing I just say is that, we need to be around other parents that we can be really honest with. You set that tone in a wonderful way, and we need to be with people who can laugh, cry, have a glass of wine, talk about what it's like to accompany someone through total transformation, which is what adolescence is. And I think sometimes we've lost some of that parent community by this age. Maybe we made new parent friends when we first became parents, but some of those might have drifted. So I think if nothing else, find the parents you can be brutally honest with so that you have people to go through this adventure with.
I do think that parenting competition of I'm the perfect parent, sort of like I don't know if you've seen Bad Moms, but the Alicia Applegate, or I forget who it was, whoever plays the PTA mother, she's super type A with her PowerPoints and judgy, and I think when you start trying to be that, you're headed for a train wreck. But when you can be that messy bad mom or bad dad and sort of embrace it a little bit, I feel like I'm a happier person.
I agree. Yeah. And maybe that's part of the gift of having kids this age, that we can't pretend that we have it all together. So we may as well enjoy being messy humans together.
Chris, thank you so much. Again, Chris Balme, the book is The Magic in Middle School. It's available on Amazon, and I'll put a link to that, and maybe you could say your website.
Thank you so much, Darren. It's a huge pleasure to be here. And the website is chrisbalme, BALME.com.
Excellent. If you have questions for either of us, you're welcome to post them in the comments. And again, those show notes have links to everything you need. And again, I can't stress this enough. If you have a middle school age kid or are about to in your life, this will be a super helpful tool for you to sort of navigate these crazy times we're in. Chris, I will see you very soon, and I look forward to having you on again.
Thanks so much, Darren. Pleasure to be here.